We're live here on the Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page, and we are coming off the heels of a 47-21 loss by the Syracuse football team today. They go to Death Valley. They take on the #1 Clemson Tigers. And look, we'll start with a couple of positives. #1, Syracuse covered a historic point spread. They were 46.5-point underdogs. The line even moved up to 48 right before kickoff on some boards with the news that Taj Harris, Syracuse wide receiver, did not travel with the team. And Syracuse was within one score of the Clemson Tigers in the third quarter. But ultimately, Clemson pulled away. It beat Syracuse 47-21. It's great to be back with you here live, thanks to our friends at Krause Health. And we are going to be chatting with you live here. But if you do miss this chat and want to watch it on demand, just a reminder that we do put this on YouTube. Syracuse Orange Sports, follow that there. You can see the YouTube clip in my recap on syracuse.com, which comes out Sunday mornings after Syracuse games. But just a reminder, thanks to Krause Health, we are live here after every Syracuse football game as well. So that's the good news. They covered the 46.5 for entertainment purposes only, if you happen to put a little wager on that. And they were within one score. The bad news here is that I'm not saying Syracuse would have won the game, because I think Clemson's Clemson, and eventually they found their footing and they made big plays. But there was a critical structure in this game that I think is going to gnaw at Syracuse football fans, and is going to be a big point of discussion as this game ends and as people look back on it here. Let's go back to the third quarter. An impressive game by Syracuse. They got a pick six by Garrett Williams. They had a punt block, which put them in position to score a touchdown. The defense holds Clemson. We'll go over the stats here momentarily, but seeing how Duke and Liberty, of all teams, rushed for 336 and 338 yards respectively against Syracuse in back-to-back weeks. You expected the worst with one of the best running backs in the country and Travis Etienne facing Syracuse. He was in and out of the game with injury, still ended up with 3 touchdowns on the day. Bottom line is we're in the third quarter. Syracuse trailing 27-14 at halftime. You come out of halftime, and Syracuse scores. They score on a big touchdown. 4th and 4 play. Clemson punts from midfield. Next drive, 83-yard touchdown strike from Rex Culpepper to Nykeem Johnson. It's Clemson 27, Syracuse 21. Syracuse is in this thing. They're in the game. They're making Clemson nervous. What happens next is Trevor Lawrence gets sacked by McKinley Williams. Clemson goes 3 and out. Syracuse gets the ball back with serious momentum here. Now, after a drive where Culpepper found Hendricks and they're kind of scrapping and clawing, they're just short of a first down. We're talking 4th and inches. And this is where the momentum of the game swung back to Clemson. Instead of rushing to the line, going for it on 4th and short, I don't think there's any question Syracuse goes for it there. This is Clemson. This is the #1 team in the country. You have momentum. You have nothing to lose. You got to go for it here, either on a quick play or Syracuse calls timeout. Okay, fine. They had a 4th and short play earlier in the game, which was another bad play. It was a wildcat with Nykeem Johnson, who kind of got a 5-yard head start running up to the line. He got stuffed. There was another 4th and short play in the third quarter. It was at the 37-yard line. I didn't really expect Syracuse to go for it. They didn't. This was your moment. You go for it. You go for it quickly, but you call timeout. And Dino Babers comes out of that timeout, and they punt the football. That's unacceptable. You call a timeout in that spot, in that moment, and give Brent Venables, great name by the way, one of the best defensive coordinators in football, more time to figure out what you're doing, more time to plot against you after he stopped a 4th down play earlier in the game. But you punt the football out of a timeout? What are you doing? That is unacceptable. It's an unacceptable call from Dino Babers there. As you can guess, Clemson eventually takes over. Now, in the next possession, the ball went over Trevor Lawrence's head. They actually had to give the ball back to Syracuse, but what happened? Culpepper fumbles, Clemson scores on the fumble recovery. They go up 35-21, and that was it. So Syracuse, that was within one score in that moment with an opportunity to at least do something. I'm not saying they would have won the game had they gone for it, converted on 4th down, and scored eventually, because Clemson did eventually do some Clemson things. Rex Culpepper had a tough day and a couple of great plays. We mentioned the 83-yard touchdown strike to Nykeem Johnson, a couple other nice throws. But he had 3 interceptions on the day and did not entirely play well. Sean Tucker had another nice day running the football, though he got banged up a little bit. So it's disappointing that Dino Babers didn't feel like you put all the cards on the table, you roll the dice, all of the analogies here, and you keep Clemson running scared, at least for a little bit more. If you convert that fourth down and let's say tie the game or take the lead if you go for two, right? If you're in a spot where you're making Clemson nervous because you're up either 28-27 or whatever the score would have been had Syracuse scored, right? Depending on if they went for two or whatever. I don't think they would have. But point being, middle of the third quarter, Death Valley, the number one team in the country, you're making them nervous. And when players get nervous, they start making mistakes and things happen. Instead, Syracuse gave the game back to Clemson, a team you just can't do that to. After going round for round, Rocky against Drago here for a while, as a 46.5-point dog. So, yeah, they covered the point spread. Way to go. But they're still 1-5, and just a disappointing way to lose a football game. So I think some Syracuse fans will be chapped by that, and I think they should, honestly. Let's go over some numbers from this game. Rex Culpepper was 10 of 26 overall, 175 yards, a touchdown, and 3 picks. Another nice day for Sean Tucker. He did not get to 100 yards, but 10 carries for 63 yards. Got in the end zone as well. Nykeem Johnson, including a reverse, at 2 carries for 59 yards in this game. Markenzie Pierre got some mop-up duty late in the game and rushed for 16 yards on the day. The young Jacobian Morgan got in, though he didn't attempt to pass. He just handed off to Markenzie Pierre for most of this. On the receiving end for Syracuse, remember Taj Harris did not travel. You'll recall he told the television camera last week who's number one, flipped it the bird. Dino Babers saying earlier this week that Taj apologized to the team. It would be handled internally, but we found out today he didn't even travel to Clemson. We don't know if that's the reason why he didn't travel to Clemson. This is a team that's been ravaged by injury, but one can certainly put 2 and 2 together there. So Anthony Quealy continued to be a positive emerging force on this team for Syracuse. 5 catches, 58 yards on the day for him. Ed Hendricks finally cracking the field. We've heard so much about Ed. He's been battling injury. Nice player, big target. I think he established a little bit of a rapport with Rex today. He had 3 catches for 24 yards on the day. We mentioned Nykeem Johnson's 83-yard touchdown pass. That was his 1 catch of the day. Sherrod Johnson also with a catch for 10 yards on the day. I'll tell you who was probably the most impressive player on the field today for Syracuse, and that was Garrett Williams. Garrett Williams, the freshman cornerback who had the pick 6 on Trevor Lawrence, a couple other pass breakups. He was terrific. And this is a Syracuse team overall that's obviously been ravaged by injury, but particularly in the secondary, when you lose your All-American safety, Andre Sisco, Trill Williams is playing banged up. Eric Coley's out for this season, as we found out yesterday. Garrett Williams has been great. He's been one of the shining spots on this team and is one of those freshmen, and we mentioned a few other names there, and young players that you can see the future is bright there. There is talent. They're just overwhelmed right now, having to play a lot more reps and in situations where maybe they didn't think they would be in. And, it's always overwhelming to play Clemson. But to see Garrett Williams out there holding his own against some of the better offensive players in the country, he was guarding Amari Rodgers at times, who's a terrific wide receiver for Clemson. Great, encouraging note for Syracuse football to see Garrett Williams continue to play the way he is on defense. For Clemson, Trevor Lawrence was 27 of 43, 289 yards, 2 touchdowns. Travis Etienne, 16 carries, 86 yards, 3 touchdowns. You'll take that if you're Syracuse. You'll take the fact that Clemson only had 147 yards on the ground, considering that Duke and Liberty both went over 335 yards in consecutive weeks. As a matter of fact, Syracuse outrushed Clemson in this game, believe it or not, by a mark of 150 to 147. All told, Clemson had 455 yards to Syracuse's 325. Clemson 308 to Syracuse's 175. In the air, we mentioned on the ground, Syracuse outrushes Clemson 150 to 147. Syracuse cut back on the penalties today. This has been a big problem for this team. They're pacing to be one of the leading teams in the country in terms of penalties. Just 5 for 35 yards for the Orange. Clemson had 4 for 25. Syracuse still not great on third down. They're one of the worst teams in the country in that mark. 4 of 13 on the day. On third down, we mentioned those fourth down plays Syracuse went for. Most importantly, did not go for. Instead of doing that, they punt out of a timeout. Clemson was 8 of 17 on third down for the day. All told, Clemson had 27 first downs to Syracuse's 11 on the day. So those are some of the key overall numbers in this matchup. But I think this one's going to come down to decision making. It's not only, by the way, the timeout punt. Syracuse ends the third quarter. They come out of that timeout, that automatic timeout at the end of the quarter with the football and have to call timeout again. They also burned a couple timeouts in the first half. Now, I don't get so worked up about first half timeouts. You want one or two going down the stretch in case you need them to, stop the clock to put a score on the board, which Clemson was trying to do before halftime, and that's when Syracuse got their defensive touchdown, right? That's when Syracuse really showed that they were going to hang in this game a lot more than people thought they would. I didn't think we'd see Trevor Lawrence in this game past halftime, and he was into it well into the fourth quarter because of the way Syracuse played on defense at times and some things that they did. But you can't blow timeouts like that. I mean, Dino Babers is in his fifth year as head coach. That's not something you can blame on young players. Yeah, procedurally, maybe some things were happening out there, but out of a timeout, you punt, and out of a timeout in the third quarter, you have to burn another timeout. I mean, that's inexcusable. And this was the week that Dino got the vote of confidence from John Wildhack, which all told, I think, was going to happen. Dino's got a contract extension that takes him, I believe, through the year 2024. So till the next presidential election, first day of early voting here in New York State. I'm sure a lot of you have voted already in this election, as early voting is prominent in this country this year, not to get political during a football show, but Dino's contract takes him through the next election in 2024. And I didn't think, no matter how bad things got, Syracuse was going to pay him off, right? John Wildhack saying that Dino will be his coach in 2021 and hopefully beyond that. I think Syracuse has got to make a bowl game next year to solidify that statement beyond 2021, but who knows what college football is even going to look like next year. This was a weird year. You give Dino a pass for a number of reasons, agree or disagree on that. But these coaching decisions, you have to send a message to the fan base that you're going to go down fighting. It's inconceivable to me. I'm thinking of that great movie, A Princess Bride, right? Inconceivable. That's what he says, right, in that movie. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I cannot believe you, on fourth and short, you call a timeout and you punt out of that situation. Had the defense been playing okay enough maybe to have confidence you can make a stop on Clemson, believe it or not, the answer to that's yes, because they had made some stops, but you got to switch up momentum. You got to seize control at that point. And it's just disappointing to see that. Who knows where the game could have gone from there? Clemson's Clemson. Maybe they still take over and win, but you don't want to go down like that. Okay, let's see how you guys are reacting to this. Appreciate you checking in here on this Saturday afternoon. I always like to see where you're watching us from, so drop in where you're watching us from in the comments. I see Mike is in El Paso. Hello, Mike. Another Mike saying that the young secondary played well. Evan saying Rex was not good. Tough spot against Clemson, but he's really, really inaccurate. Evan, I agree with you. He's tough in short yardage. The timing plays, the short yardage, the screens. Rex he's brutal in those spots. Okay, and I'm talking football wise here. I always have a hard time criticizing Rex because he's such a good kid. He overcame cancer, as we know. He's got an amazing family that we've heard. His parents are on Survivor, and Tom Brady's his neighbor. And just he's such a great, positive, inspirational force. But if we're analyzing football, in the short yardage, he's brutal. It's interesting that he can throw the deep ball as well as he did. We saw the deep pass against Pittsburgh, the Nykeem Johnson pass in this game. He can sling it. When Rex has to throw the ball deep, he can certainly do it. He doesn't have the velocity that Tommy DeVito has on his passes, but he can do it. Short yardage, though, Evan, completely agree with you. It's a struggle. Blake's checking in from Houston today. Appreciate that, sir. Saying the Cuse looked good for three quarters, played hard for Dino, which is good going forward. Why doesn't Benson get touches? He reminds me of Gedney. That is fair to bring up. As critical as I was of Dino's decision to punt out of the timeout, this team did play hard for him today, right? Once they got the assurance that he'd be back, there was no doubt about that in my mind, but it helps when the athletic director firms that up and says he's my coach next year. They did play hard for him today. This was not feeling sorry for yourself, overwhelmed by Clemson. There were fans in Death Valley, by the way, so a little bit more intimidating of an atmosphere, but they shut that crowd up. They played hard. They played well, particularly on defense. You got to give them credit for that. As for Luke Benson, you're preaching to the choir, my friend. I feel like Syracuse should throw to the tight end more. Aaron Hackett didn't help my cause today when he dropped an easy pass. They tried to go to Benson in the end zone in the fourth quarter. I don't know if you caught that, and that was the interception that Clemson had, but you got to utilize the tight ends more in this offense. I've been preaching that all year long and completely agree with anybody that says that. Mike noting how bad the timeouts were. They really were. It's not only that, but Evan, I see your comment here too. 4th and 1, the Wildcat call. What are you doing there? Right? And that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, was out of a timeout. You come out of a timeout. Nykeem Johnson's lined up in the wild card. You're forecasting to, again, the best defensive coach in football, according to many, Brent Venables. Nykeem Johnson gets like a 4 or 5 yard head start and just charges into the line. That's not a good play. It's not a good strategy. At one point, remember Dino Babers early on, you go back a couple of years, it was refreshing because he did go for it on 4th down. They were aggressive on 4th down. They had better calls on 4th down. He's regressed in that department, and that's got to get better. Alan S., who came in to relieve Culpepper, I wanted to mention that. Glad you did, Alan. That was Jacobian Morgan. So Syracuse has 2 freshman quarterbacks. Jacobian Morgan, who is from Mississippi, 6'4", 200 pounds. Dylan Markowitz, who's from Texas, recruited by offensive coordinator Sterling Gilbert, who's 6'5", I believe 220 he's listed as. So they're both big kids. Morgan got more of the reps at practice this week behind Culpepper. He didn't throw a pass, but came in late in the game. And as we go here, it's time to get the freshmen some work, right? Rex Culpepper is a placeholder. He's going to do what he can. He's a fighter, as we mentioned. He's going to make some plays here and there. But in what is now essentially a lost season for Syracuse, they fall to 1-5 on the year. It's going to be a tough go for them down the road here with the short numbers that they have. Less than 60 scholarship players, half of them freshmen. It's time to see Morgan and Markowitz. What had to happen, though, to be fair, is they need reps in practice, and they weren't getting them. You can't throw a freshman out there without some sort of comfort level in getting a certain amount of reps. Football players are about routine and reps and going through the rhythm of a practice week, and Morgan and Markowitz were getting nothing but scout team and kind of scraps up to this point. They're starting to catch up in that department. Morgan got more reps at practice this week than Markowitz, so we'll see how that goes going forward. I'd like to see the freshmen get a look. Let's see what we got. Syracuse is going to be aggressive in the transfer market. There was a story this week of a quarterback, Garrett Schrader at Mississippi State, who's entered the transfer portal. He was once recruited by Syracuse. Syracuse has already been in contact with his high school coach. Syracuse is going to be very aggressive in the transfer portal market, not only in the offseason, but, a player entered the portal just this week, as we mentioned. So we'll see what that position ends up rounding out being with Tommy DeVito coming back next year, of course, but they are going to be uber aggressive in trying to land a quarterback. In the meantime, you got to see what you got in these freshmen. Blake saying, Brent, tough year. How do we look for next year if healthy? Blake, the interesting thing there is a couple of things. One, seniors can come back, right? The NCAA granted seniors basically another year of eligibility, penalty-free. So any senior on this team that wants to can come back. The question is, who will be, right? We know you lose Cisco, not only to injury, but he's going to enter the NFL draft. He's already declared that. So you look at some of the players experience-wise that will be back. We mentioned Garrett Williams. There has been some freshmen that have really shown some things. Sean Tucker comes back. If any of the running backs that opted out decide to come back. Luke Benson back. All these receivers are young that return next year. All the young players on defense, some we mentioned, some we didn't. So next year, at least these guys will have the benefit of experience, and a lot more experience than maybe they thought they'd have this year. But you got to close the gap on quarterback. That's the big issue. Syracuse, Tommy DeVito's been pretty much nothing but hype at this point. He's had his moments, but it's not like he's won big games at the North Carolina game, but that was in relief of Eric Dungy. He'll have another shot to do it, but until Syracuse solidifies the quarterback position and the offensive line, it's going to be as how can I put this? Inconsistent is the best way I can put it, that it is now. Greg saying the defense seems to be much better versus a more traditional offense, a running threat at quarterback they can't figure out. That's the key, Greg, and I think that's what they have in Morgan, albeit, he's raw, and we're not going to see him really flourish until next year, but you need that dual threat. And it's the obvious reference. What Eric Dungy did is he made plays with his legs, he hid the flaws in the offensive line, and defenses had to respect that he could always take off and run. got himself into trouble in that case, too. He was injured. He lost what was essentially an entire year of football due to injury. That's the risk you take. But you need a quarterback that can move, that can extend plays in the passing game, that can make plays with his legs, that you can call plays for. You can't do that for Rex Culpepper. I thought you could for Tommy DeVito because he's actually pretty quick, but he just never developed into that kind of quarterback. So I think that's what Dino and Sterling have to really recognize here is, and look, that's football in a nutshell. Just look around the game, and that's what you're seeing. All these quarterbacks that can make plays with their arm and their legs, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, the list goes on and on of quarterbacks you got to have. So Syracuse has got to find that, and hopefully we'll see if Jacobian Morgan or Dylan Markowitz are either one of those guys. Dave in Arizona, David in Tampa. Lucas is in upstate New York. Thanks for checking in. Minnesota for David, who says no moral victories, but this is as good as it gets against the Tigers. Christopher's checking in from New Jersey. Hello, Christopher. My mother's from Toms River. So I've been to Jersey plenty of times. Got that new Springsteen album on Friday, too, so that was good. Scott saying a better fourth down calls with better players on fourth down, wants to play the young kids. Mike saying Rex threw those interceptions right to Clemson players. Totally on him. Wasn't even rushed. Yeah, that's the disappointing thing. It's one thing if you're rushed out of the pocket trying to make something out of nothing, just threw it right to those players. And again, in short yardage, Rex really struggles, and that's just not something I think we're going to see get better. Christopher asks if DeVito will transfer. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Now, I want to be firm here. I haven't heard anything to this effect. There's no whispers on that. But just asking, would it make sense for him to transfer? I wouldn't doubt it because fresh set of scenery. He does have the arm talent. There's something about these quarterbacks coming in, especially with the year of eligibility waived. That's the other big thing for Syracuse. So you have seniors that can come back. The transfer rule changes in the NCAA because you don't have to wait a year anymore. Every player gets a one-time opportunity to transfer without the current rule, which is you have to sit out a year unless you get a waiver from the NCAA, right? Everybody can go wherever they want next year, one-time penalty-free. So if DeVito sees an opportunity to jump, I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. I think he's pretty dedicated to Syracuse. I think he likes here. I think he's close to his degree and everything, but I wouldn't blame him if he did, because Syracuse has to shore up that position behind him, and he has done nothing to put a lock on that job, and that's partially not his fault. The offensive line was brutal last year. He got hurt this year, and what was a legit football play, not a fluke thing. Andre Sisco's injury was a fluke. Got hurt in pregame warmups of all things. Tommy got his ankle caught under a defender, and it's unfortunate, but I think that's fair speculation that we could see that happen, especially with, again, how aggressive I think Syracuse is going to be in the transfer market. And they have to. Look at the spot they got caught in here. God forbid if something happens to Rex Culpepper. And again, he hasn't been that impressive overall. He's made his plays and he's keeping the offense rolling. But if he goes down, now you got Jacobian Morgan, Dylan Markowitz, David Summers, all freshmen who have no reps. Morgan got a few today, but not anything serious, right? He just handed the ball off to Markenzie Pierre. That makes a bad situation dire at quarterback. So the lesson is you always have to have quarterbacks. We were arguing about Eric Dungy and Tommy DeVito. How spoiled were we? But that's what good teams have, right? That's what elite good teams have, is two quarterbacks that can play. The old adage of two quarterbacks equals none, that doesn't exist anymore. You need two or three guys that can step in, and not just the 5 stars and the elite talents that programs like Clemson and Alabama and the top schools have. Even a school like Syracuse, they tried to get Cade Fortin in the transfer market. They targeted a couple other players, couldn't do it, and now they're in a spot here with 5 games to go, that if Rex gets hurt, you got a freshman out there for the rest of the year, which I want to see play. I think they have to kind of ease him in there when they can, but to just hand the ball to one of those players right now, they're nowhere near ready to do that. So that's a tough spot to be in. All right, guys, I think we're going to end it there for today. Always appreciate you coming by. We're going to be here next week on Halloween. How about that? Another noon kickoff. So we'll be here as soon as the game is over live. But again, if you missed this, you can catch it on YouTube on the Syracuse Orange Sports page. I pop it in my recap on syracuse.com as well. Always appreciate you hanging with us live here. Thanks to our friends at Krause Health. You guys enjoy the rest of your weekend, okay? And we will meet again on Halloween. Wear your costumes. Is Uncle Brent going to wear a costume next week? I don't know. Maybe. I'll think about it. I got a Darth Vader costume around here somewhere. Maybe I'll do the post-game show in costume. You'll have to tune in next week to see. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your weekend, and thanks for hanging with us live here. Thanks to Krause Health.